Norman is a Romance language which can be classified as one of the OL languages along with Picard and Walloon. The name Norman French is sometimes used to describe not only the Norman language, but also the administrative languages of Anglo-Norman and Law French used in England. For the most part, the written forms of Norman and Modern French are intercomprehensible. Geographical distribution: Norman is spoken in mainland Normandy in France where it has no official status, but is classed as a regional language. It is taught in a few colleges near Cherbourg. In the Channel Islands, the Norman language has developed separately, but not in isolation, to form what are recognized as JARIAIS, Guernsey Copyright CA or Guernsey French and Sequier. JARIAIS and Guernsey Copyright CA are recognized as regional languages by the British and Irish governments within the framework of the British-Irish Council. Sequier is in fact a descendant of the 16th century January RIAIS used by the original colonists from Jersey who settled the then uninhabited island. The last native speakers of Orignace, the Norman language of Alderney, died during the 20th century, although some remember still exist. The dialect of Herm also lapsed, at an unknown date. An isogloss termed the Line Jowett separates the northern and southern dialects of the Norman language. There are also dialectal differences between Western and Eastern dialects. 3 different standardized spellings are used: Continental Norman, JARIAIS, and DGARNA Copyright CA. These represent the different developments and particular literary histories of the varieties of Norman. Norman may therefore be described as a pluricentric language. The Anglo-Norman dialect of Norman was a language of administration in England following the Norman conquest. This left a legacy of Law French in the language of English courts. In Ireland, Norman remained strongest in the area of South East Ireland where the Hiberno-Normans invaded in 1169. Norman is still in use for some very formal legal purposes in the UK, such as when the monarch gives royal assent to an Act of Parliament using the phrase, La Reine le Roi le veut. The Norman conquest of southern Italy also brought the language to Sicily and the southern part of the Apennine Peninsula, where it has left a few traces in the Sicilian language. C. Norman French influences in Sicilian. Literature in Norman ranges from early Anglo-Norman literature through the 19th century Norman literary Renaissance to modern writers. Today, the Norman language is strongest in the less accessible areas of the former Duchy of Normandy, the Channel Islands and the Cotentin Peninsula in the west, and the Pays de Caux in the east. Ease of access from Paris and the popularity of the coastal resorts of central Normandy, such as Deauville, in the 19th century led to a significant loss of distinctive Norman culture in the central low-lying areas of Normandy. History. When Norse invaders from modern-day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden arrived in the then province of Neustria and settled the land that became known as Normandy, they gradually adopted the Gallo-Romance speech of the existing populations much as Norman rulers in England later adopted the speech of the administered people. However, in both cases, the copyright rights contributed elements of their own language to the newly enriched languages that developed in the territories. In Normandy, the new Norman language inherited vocabulary from Norse. The influence on phonology is more disputed, although it is argued that the retention of aspirated and in Norman is due to Norse influence. Examples of Norman words of Norse origin: in some cases, Norse words adopted in Norman have been borrowed into French or Euro, and more recently some of the English words used in French can be traced back to Norman origins. Following the Norman conquest of 1066, the Norman language spoken by the new rulers of England left traces of specifically Norman words that can be distinguished from the equivalent lexical items in French. Other words such as captain, kennel, cattle and canvas introduced from Norman exemplified how Norman retained a from Latin that was not retained in French. Norman immigrants to North America also introduced some Normanisms to Quebec French and French in Canada generally. Joel, a working-class sociolect of Quebec in particular, exhibits a Norman influence. Some expressions that are currently in use in Canada are, abria wife out sabria, wife fait frate. French abrita, barre equals French bar, bear equals French bateau, burs equals French riddles done chariot, bluet equals French mitil, Chample, a variant form of Norman Campelus equals French Rayonnet, Croche equals French Tordu, Garnet equals French Ternoix, Gorgans equals French Varves de Marais, Gorgon equals French Bijou de Porc Fumer. Copyright E. Gritcha for Norman Griner equals French Grimaceur Grafner for, Gratala. Copyright Gar Raymond A. Sances Grafner for, a copyright Grishana, Grea or Griila for, Pra. Copyright Para, I kite or a site for, ICI, Ato for, Osi, Jerka or Juka for, Jutcha, Mitan for, Milieu, Margana. 4. Da copyright Gainer, Magana for, Maltritaru Mormina, Pygosh for, Cheville, Pogni for, Poina. Copyright E. Pomonique for, Pulmonique, Racoin for, Racoin, Ramara for, Ratacha, Ramu Greer, for, Devenir Humide, Mugwaranza for, Avoir la respiration Garna. Copyright E. A Bruyanti, Leva, Pusaravic Unlevia, Resida for, Ra. Copyright Vela, Activa, Sacra for, Sacra, Flynn for, Venin, Blim for, Blime, Blow for, Voila, Zias for, Yeah. See also, Norman toponymy, Jarrett line. Footnotes. References, Essai de Grammaire de la langue normande, UPN, 1995. ISBN 2-95094-0-7. Venust Vermeer. UPN, 1984. La Normandie Dialectale, 1999, ISBN 2-84133-076-1, Alain Marie, Les Auteurs Patissants du Calvados, 2005. ISBN 2-84706-178-9. Roger Jean Lebar-Benchen, Les Faits de la Hague, 1991. ISBN 2-9505884-0-9. Jean-Louis Vanet, Les Patissants Bas Normands, N.D., Saint-La. Andra. Copyright Dupont, Dictionnaire des Patissants du Cotentin, Socia. Copyright Tar. Copyright Darche. Copyright Ologie de la Manche, Saint-La, 1992. Geraint Jennings and Jan Marquis, The Toad and the Donkey, An Anthology of Norman Literature from the Channel Islands, 2011, ISBN 978-1-903427-61-3. External links, Norman French. New International Encyclopedia 1905.